In this video, I review some basics about men and masculinities. Most of this you'll find in Chapter 6 of the text, Gender, Ideas, Interactions, Institutions. The first point is that the gender binary is hierarchical. Men are valued over women, and masculinity is valued over femininity. This has negative consequences for both men and women. For women, the consequences are clear. They're on the bottom of this two-category hierarchy. This hierarchy means that women are often in roles as assistants or helpers to men. Women have less social status, receive fewer material rewards on average, and men's interests tend to take priority over women's. For men, the negative consequences are less obvious, but still quite real. That is that their range of socially acceptable life experiences are narrower than women's socially acceptable options. So this hierarchy in the binary is complex and involves much more than men and masculinity being valued over women and femininity. Cheerleading is used as an example of this complexity. Cheerleading began as an all-male sport in the middle of the 19th century. It was thought to be about leadership and athleticism and was as prestigious and considered as masculine as playing football. Cheerleading was something men did, and it was a valuable thing to do in college. In fact, 3 U.S. presidents began as college cheerleaders. Eisenhower, Roosevelt, and Reagan were all cheerleaders in college. Then, when so many men headed to war during World War I, women joined cheerleader squads. At that time, people worried that these women would become too masculine by engaging in cheerleading. Then women were pushed out of cheerleading when men returned from the war, until World War II, when men went off to war again. Then women entered cheerleading, this time for good, and as a result, how we think about cheerleading changed. Cheerleading became supportive of men's athletic teams, cheering them on, and was no longer seen as an athletic team in its own right or as something future leaders of the country do. Cheerleading became known for big smiles, physical attractiveness, and peppiness. In recent years, the complicated stunts and gymnastics tricks have been much more appreciated and resulted in competitive tournaments, and men have entered cheerleading again. To sum it up, cheerleading was about masculinity and leadership, and then cheerleading was relegated to the sidelines, so to speak, to a support activity, and became about physical appearance. It became a feminine activity. That change in how we view the exact same activity is about gender. Now let's discuss gendered power. First, patriarchy. You've all heard that term. Most people know that it literally means the rule of the father. Patriarchs, fathers, head of households and such, have the power. They are in charge, responsible for, make decisions about, can sign contracts, make claims, are responsible for wives and children. He is in charge socially and legally. As states moved in a democratic direction away from monarchies, women had to fight for their rights to citizenship, to vote, to hold office. This degree of inequality has a legacy. Men continue to be seen as the generic human being. For example, there are issues, and then there are women's issues. So the generic, for everyone, is men. And then there is the special case of women's issues. Men are seen as people first, whereas women are seen as women, as gendered first, and as people second. I remember seeing basketball banners at Indiana University's gym that listed women on them or nothing. Here are some championship banners hanging in Assembly Hall on the campus of Indiana University. In which division do you think these championships were won? The men's division or the women's division? Why? Shouldn't the banners say in the men's division? All of the women's banners have the word women on them. There is a presumption that no mention means the normal, regular division, men's. So the message is there is the championship, and then there is the other one, the other thing, the women's division. Some contend we live in a modified patriarchy, defined as the persistence of men being seen as central, the norm, or neutral category. We still live in a society with sexism, androcentrism, and subordination. Sexism refers to prejudice based on biological sex, valuing males over females. Research supports this. When people look at the same resumes and you just change the first name of the applicant to make it seem as if the applicant is a male or a female, it turns out that employers respond differently, on average rating the male name application as reflective of someone who is more qualified, more hireable, deserving of a higher salary than the other applicant. You know, the exact same application, but with a name usually associated with being female. Androcentrism is parallel to sexism, except it is a gender prejudice, not sex prejudice, granting more status, resources, respect, value to masculine things, masculinity over femininity. This explains why women work hard, seek to participate in things such as ski jumping and football, but men do not fight to do synchronized swimming or to become nurses. Masculinity equals desirable characteristics and activities, femininity, not so much. Subordination is putting women into positions that have them subservient to men, secretaries to bosses, paralegals to lawyers, nurses to doctors, dental hygienists to dentists. So men tend to do the higher paid, more prestigious work, while women tend to do the lower paid, less prestigious, and less glamorous work. So gender for men. How is closely following the rules of masculinity bad for men? It limits their activities, their occupations, and other lifestyle options. Like gender for women, it begins at the beginning. Parents of boys are usually okay when it comes to their boy children cooking and cleaning some, but generally speaking, they are much less comfortable with boys expressing interests in any icons of femininity, such as wearing pink or wearing frilly clothes or having their nails polished. Sissy is one of many gender slurs directed towards boys that is designed to keep them in line, part of gender policing. And indeed, as quoted in your text, it is as if masculinity is so fragile that apparently even the slightest brush with the feminine destroys it. This to some degree explains male flight, the phenomenon that men leave occupations as women join them in greater numbers. Cheerleading is an example of this. When women entered in large numbers, men moved out of cheerleading. Also, there's the idealized image of a man to live up to that most men do not come close to. In addition, men are trained to resist their empathic impulses, and instead, aggression and violence are encouraged. There are many times more men than women in jail for violent offenses. Likewise, men are much more likely to do dangerous and unhealthy things, less likely to see a doctor than women are, less likely to attend to their health, generally speaking, than women are. Finally, some men then make a patriarchal bargain, a deal really, in which they want the advantages accorded to men and are willing to sacrifice for them. They recognize that they may not have this or that ideal male quality, but at least they say they are men and not women.